Hi, I'm doing the Bearing book today. This is chapter 15 of Acts that they're discussing. This is section 5 of their book on Acts. The title of the section is The Apostles and the Older Men Gathered Together, a quote from Acts 15:6. Under that, they have a paragraph that reads, "A heated issue arose that threatened the peace and unity of the congregations. To whom did the congregations look for direction and guidance to resolve the dispute?" In this section, we will gain insight into the way the first century congregation was organized, which sets a pattern for God's people today. And now we're into chapter 13. And the chapter 13 is entitled, a partial quote, "There had occurred no little dissension." And under that is a subheading, which is, "The issue of circumcision goes before the governing body." So I would say when we read the whole of Acts 15 a couple of videos ago, we read the entire thing. Do you remember anywhere in Acts 15 the phrase or the mention of a governing body? So what has the Bearing book done here? They have planted an idea into your head, and so now you think it's in the text, governing body. In paragraph 4 of this section, they make this statement, or they ask this question: why, though, were Jewish believers still promoting circumcision some 13 years after the Apostle Peter, as directed by God, had welcomed uncircumcised Gentiles into the Christian congregation? So, as Jehovah's Witnesses, what we do is we jump to the conclusion that if the Gentiles do not need to be circumcised, no one should be circumcised, because it's not needed for salvation. So no one should even keep the Mosaic law that's in the Christian church, according to this thinking. But one finds, if one goes through the whole of the book of Acts, many Jews still talking about keeping the law. And you have examples of James and Peter. James speaks of the believers that had those who had become believers, and he's in Jerusalem, says, many believers were zealous for the law, is the phrase he uses. But he doesn't call for Gentiles to keep the law. I think we shouldn't be surprised that the Jewish Christians would continue to circumcise, would continue to follow the Mosaic law, but particularly that they would continue circumcision practice. We have been studying the book of Genesis with a group. And Genesis 17, this is what a Jewish Christian would know. Genesis 17:7, when God makes a covenant with Abraham, he says, 17 verse 7, "And I will keep my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land in which you lived as a foreigner, the entire land of Canaan, for a lasting possession, and I will be their God." God said further to Abraham, "As for you, you are to keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant between me and you. Okay, I just lost my place. Between me and you, that you and your offspring after you will keep. Every male among you must get circumcised. You must circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it will serve as a sign of the covenant between me and you. Throughout your generations, every male among you, 8 days old, must be circumcised. And then in verse 13, he says this is a lasting covenant. So it's not something that gets stopped. This is a sign of a covenant, a special covenant between Abraham and his offspring. It carries on. At the end of that question, they reference Acts chapter 10, which is the occasion of Cornelius becoming a believer, and what happened between Peter and the Jews that went with them when they met Cornelius. But read the account, and you will find that the controversy that they talk about is table fellowship, really. When Peter goes into the house of Cornelius and his friends. So you find that in chapter 11, verses 1 to 3. You could read that. And in 11, verse 3, it talks about the circumcision party that criticized Peter for having table fellowship with Gentiles. When you read the whole account of Cornelius and company becoming believers, and Peter and the whole situation, how Peter is called and how God reaches Cornelius, you find there is no governing body involvement at all. Peter isn't assigned to go there. It's all done by God. It's all done by Holy Spirit, their direction. We'll do some more in this particular first section of Acts 15, but we'll leave that for the next video. I'm going to link to 2 previous bearing videos, numbers 34 and 37. 34 is, why does the bearing book omit the quote, "the Spirit said"? And the second one is, the bearing book hides apostles' churches not uniform. Till the next time.